I got pregnant in hopes that my sperm donor would support me financially. I don't work, never have, never will. 1, because I don't want to, and 2, because it's against my religion. My plan was to always just get pregnant and have my baby daddy support me financially through child support. Turns out I'm a lesbian, so I had to go to a sperm bank and get artificially inseminated. One of my friends worked at the sperm bank, and she secretly gave me my sperm donor's contact info. So I befriended him and, invited him over for drinks, and I got a DNA sample off of his cup and sent in a sample of his DNA and my son's DNA to make sure that they were a match. And they were, so I was like, perfect, so I'm going to take him to court and try to get child support. I lost, but I'm not giving up hope, because now that I'm famous, I'm trying to find a judge that is a fan of mine that will take this case and pretend they don't know who I am and rule in my favor to where my sperm donor still has to support me financially. The kid wouldn't exist if it weren't for him, so he should be obligated to pay something.
Shut up, bitch!